Hey guys, Tina here and welcome to another video in my series A Year in Review videos. This time around I will be talking about my favorite new to me authors that I read this year, and let's begin. The first author I'm going to mention is James S. A. Corey. This is Leviathan Wakes, which is book 1 in the Expanse series. There's actually a TV show based off of this series if you want to check that out. This series is a series of space operas. Everything is happening in space. The humanity has colonized our solar system, so we have different colonies, different races, and they clash, and it's, life. And in this book 1 we get to see a crew of a spaceship come across a certain secret that they were not meant to know, and also a detective that is looking for a missing girl, and their stories sort of mash and come together throughout the book. I would classify it as sort of a murder mystery adventure type of book, and even if you're not a fan of sci-fi, yes, there's some scientific language in it, but it's not too bad, and it's it's a really easy to read book, and if you want to try something sci-fi, definitely maybe pick it up. I think it's a pretty good start to that genre. Another author that I came across this year is Genevieve Codman. This is The Invisible Library, which is book 1 in a trilogy, and it tells the story of Irene, who is a librarian, and she works for this interdimensional library that collects books from all different universes, and whenever there's a special edition, they send a librarian to get it into this world, and that's what Irene does. And one time she's sent into this world with her new apprentice Kai to get a certain edition, and when she gets there she realizes that the book is missing, its previous owner murdered, and she has to figure things out, figure what happened. And it's really like an adventurous book. It's a light read. It has this steampunk feel to it, Victorian type of era, and it's really enjoyable, and I really enjoyed it, which is why it's here. Next author I would like to mention is Huntley Fitzpatrick. This is her first novel, My Life Next Door, which I have been hearing a lot throughout the years ever since it came out, but until this year I never picked it up for some reason. And this is a contemporary summer read about a girl that lives next door to a really huge family, and she never really had any contact with them simply because her mother is pretty strict and sort of snobbish, and doesn't really like that family at all, looks down on them. And now that she's 17 and her mother is busy with her political career, she gets to meet them and get to know them, and she really likes it, and I did too. I really love this book. I loved the big family, and all the characters were so much fun, especially some of the kids, the younger kids. They were really a joy to read about, and I really loved it. It's a perfect summary read. Next author I stumbled across this year is Alison Goodman and her The Dark Days Club. This tells the story of Lady Helen, who is looking for a husband, but before that actually happens, she comes across a club that deals with demons and such creatures, and she sort of gets sucked into it. And I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoyed the writing, the adventure. I really liked it, and I cannot wait for the sequel to come out. And I definitely cannot wait to read some more of her books. I have Iona and Iona, and hopefully next year I get around to reading those too. Next author I'm going to mention is Abigail Heartland. This year I read her Golden Boy, and I enjoyed it and I loved it. It tells the story of Max, who's intersex, and this issue has never been dealt with, and now that he's 16, some things happen, and for the first time he himself has to face this issue and figure things out, and naturally his family also has to deal with it, and it's a really interesting topic. I've never read anything like it. It was really enjoyable. I thought it was done well. I've never experienced anything like that, so I'm not entirely certain, but I think it was done well and pretty accurately. And this year there has been a lot of talk about reading diversely, and this is definitely a book that you should pick up if you're interested in that. Yeah, I loved it. I cannot recommend it more. Next author I'm going to mention is Merci Pestle. This is Night Film, the book that I've had for about 2 years, and this year I finally decided to pick it up during October, and I definitely do not regret it. I have been listening about this book for a while, and everybody, was raving about it, and it's a good book. It wasn't my favorite. You know, definitely the beginning dragged for me, but I really liked it, and I definitely want to read more by this author. But yeah, this story is about the death of Ashley Cordova, which she's a daughter of this famous director, a really mysterious guy, and we get to meet this reporter who once tried to write a story about Cordova and was well, got fired for doing that, for trying and failing to do that spectacularly, and now he is you know, trying to restore his career by trying to figure out what actually happens to Ashley, and he, you know, gets sucked into the story of her life, and there are a bunch of other characters that help him, and it was actually a really well-written book, and I mean the writing is okay, it flows really well. As I mentioned, the first 200 pages really dragged for me, but that's basically because this reporter guy, I didn't really care for him that much, but then the story pulled me in, and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of psychological things in it, a few cult things as well. As I mentioned in my wrap-up, I didn't entirely, you know, where the story is going to go a few times. I thought it was going to go more into the paranormal waters, but you know, it was a really interesting book. At the end, actually, I'm not entirely certain what happens. I think that's, you can interpret it one way or another, but yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I will definitely be picking other books by Merci pestle up in the future. For the first time, I also read something by Grossman. I picked up his The Magician's Trilogy, and I enjoyed it. It tells the story of Quentin, who is this regular guy living in Brooklyn, and he is obsessed with this series of book about this magical land called Fillory. He doesn't think that it's real or anything like that, but then he gets accepted to Break Bills, which is a school for magically inclined people, and he loves it there. He does well, and then he also learns that Fillory is real, and that just blows him away. He is a really, actually all of the characters in this books are actually really unlikable. They're really flawed, and sometimes they just annoy you, but there's just something about these books that just make you continue on reading, and they just pull you in, and the second book was definitely my favorite. The magic of Fillory is just perfect. It's great. As I mentioned in every video in which I spoke about these books, Grossman's imagination is just insane. He writes about stuff that I could not even imagine thinking of, not like, let alone writing about them. I just really enjoy them. There's also a TV show if you want to try that. I will, you know, the first season is actually a mix of book 1 and 2, so if you decide to watch them, be aware of that you will be spoiled for, you know, not just the first book. And yeah, I finished it, and I really love this trilogy as a whole, and I love it, and I'm definitely will be picking up whatever he writes next in the future. I would also like to mention Elle Kennedy. She's a new adult author, and I just recently discovered her, and I read 2 of her books. One was The Deal and the other one was The Score, and they're both part of the Off-Campus series, and I have to say I thoroughly enjoyed both of them. I actually have a review on them, and I will be linking it down below so you can go check it out, but they were really enjoyable, and yeah, it's actually not very often that I find new adult books to be any good, and these really surprised me, and I really liked them, so that's why Elle Kennedy is on this list. I'd also like to mention Becky Albertelli, and you know, this year I finally got around to reading Salmon versus the Homo sapiens Agenda, and I am really surprised how much I love that book. It dealt with a very serious topic, but in a pretty light way, and you know, it didn't diminish you know, the importance of the topic in any way. It was really enjoyable. I loved Simon. He is a great character, very optimistic, very positive, has a great outlook on life, and well, I cannot wait for her next book to come out, actually. The last author I'm going to mention is actually probably my new favorite author out of all of these that I mentioned, and that is Robin Hobb. Clearly, I have known about her for a while. You cannot be on BookTube and not hear about her, and you know, her fantasy books. But yeah, I've had these books, actually the whole trilogy, Farseer trilogy, for a while, but I never really I just never felt like picking it up, and then this year I decided, you know what, I'm gonna give it a try, and I'm so happy that I did. The first year trilogy tells the story of Fitz, who is the bastard son of the king in waiting, and once his father realizes that he has fathered a bastard, he abdicates his position and leaves Fitz to deal with the courts on his own. Basically, he's raised by the stable master, and later on the king takes an interest in him and sort of makes him into an assassin's apprentice. He learns how to, well, assassinate the king's enemies and such. And I really enjoyed this trilogy. There were a few parts in the whole series that were pretty slow and maybe redundant, but as a whole trilogy I really enjoyed it, and I will definitely be picking the continuing trilogies up next year. But yes, if you're into fantasy, you cannot not read Robin Hobb. So those were my favorite authors that I finally got around to reading this year. I am really happy that I found them, and yeah, I cannot wait to read more of their books. Let me know down in the comments what some of your favorite new authors are, and yeah, see you in my next video. Bye!